to art galleries when I was a child, and went into the big, the Tates and the National Gallery, and seen amazing paintings. But I did find a moment or an element of disconnect with some of the great painters, especially in abstraction, which I couldn't really connect it with. And it was the pictures that my parents hated, which is quite funny. The paintings that my parents really hated were these incredibly detailed landscapes where you get the mountains, you get the tiny sheep, these incredible biblical scenes, the skyscapes, the mountains, and it's almost like photorealism. And for me, that's the one that paintings that really connected with me. And my parents would say, God, that's so old-fashioned, that's so boring, why are you doing that? But for me, I really wanted to have a connection with the real world. So when I wanted to express myself, I really wanted to make a connection with what's out there and not just what was in here. And photography seems to be an amazing way of connecting the real with the imagination. And you can play with it. So every photograph is a window into the real, and it has got its feet in reality, in that indexical relationship with the real world, which makes it real for me. But then you can twist it and you can play with it, and it becomes much more playful. But also, I don't know, I feel as though I come from quite a socialist background, in the socialist as in something that everyone can share rather than an elitist attitude. So rather than a communist socialist attitude, more of a utilitarian, more of a notion of everyone can have a camera, everyone can do it, everyone understands when you present a photograph. Whereas I do get a bit scared when people go into art galleries and there's so much theory, there's so much conceptualization behind artwork that so many people feel alienated from it. And I really wanted to connect with a wider audience and connect with everyday people who don't need to have that theoretical understanding and background. So, yeah, I'd like to not talk about that very much and just give people an access to it. So photography seems to be, everyone feels as though they can understand photography. So if you know my work, this is quite different than most of the work that I've got a reputation of making. Most of my work has come from, again, a sort of a political agenda of representing people, putting them in the stage, and talking about people's lives. So I was very much involved with representation. So I did lots of pictures of squatters. I spent a lot of time squatting in Hackney, travellers, New Age travellers. I spent a few years in a bus travelling around in Europe. And I wanted to represent people in the real world, ordinary people, but saying these are humane people, rather than making them look a bit stupid or glamorising them, just trying to give a voice to people who aren't normally given a voice. But with representation also becomes a huge amount of responsibility when you take a picture of somewhere, you present it in a gallery or in a magazine out into the real world, and you put it on display, then you are responsible for that person's life. And if the press or people take a disliking or think you're misusing them, it's a very complicated relationship you have. Almost give birth to a child. You obviously give birth to an artwork. It's quite easy to give birth to a statue.
It's gone.
Statue.
Yeah.
Someone sells it, they take it, they put it in a gallery, and it has its own life. It does its own thing, and it travels around. It's the same with photographs. I sort of give birth to them, but then they lead their own life. And if they turn out to be horrible fucking people, it is really upsetting, really. I mean, you give birth to children, you bring them to respect people, to care about the environment, to love each other. If they turn into some sort of psycho, it's very embarrassing. So if your work is put into a place where you don't want to be, it is quite a strange scenario. And I've had that over the years. When my first sort of representations came out about people living in tower blocks, it got bought by the Saatchi Gallery, put in this amazing Saatchi Gallery, and it's all about representing working class communities and giving them a voice, and suddenly in a really huge gallery, even bigger than this, if that's possible. And, the people that go around and swan around with champagne, and it becomes becomes a bit of a voyeurism show of looking at people, and it makes me feel incredibly uncomfortable to a certain respect. So, and that led to sort of a major thing with me when I showed my work at the National Gallery in London. The only photography show that ever happened in National Gallery with photography, and I had a show there. And there was a huge spotlight on my community, the people I was representing, and so much debate and discussion about it that I did get a bit of a crisis point, or a real not knowing what I'm doing or why I was doing it. The pictures being sold for a lot of money. Do I really want to just sell them? And what am I doing with it? And surely I'm trying to do something positive and practical in the real world, and it's about social engagement. It's not just about making loads of bucks. And why am I doing this? Who am I showing it to? The whole thing about photography, it's open to everyone, and then suddenly it's in these very elitist institutions. But I wanted to carry on with doing my photography, but I didn't know how to continue. So I escaped to Dublin, and I got a residency at IMA. So this is really me going back to basics. This is me playing, really. Not knowing what the hell I was doing in Dublin, and just trying to not spend weeks thinking about the theory, thinking about concepts, think about what am I trying to say, what am I trying to do, but just make images which have sort of connection with me, but just doing it. So I didn't know what the hell to do. I read Ulysses, I headed down to the 40-foot, dived into that snot green mother, my scrotum fucking tightened, went up into my throat. I had a swim this morning, by the way, at Sea Point. And yeah, it's amazing. It's a real break. It really feels it's a clean start. It even clears that hangover from last night. And so when I came out of that water, and the ones there, I think that's the Sea Point, that's the Sandy Cove. Mm-hmm. Before I came to Dublin, me and a friend made this pinhole camera. It's a little small box, mahogany box, with a pinhole, but it's got a 5-4 back on it, which means I can put a negative in the back, 5 inches by 4 inches, rather than everyone else, not everyone else. A lot of people filming, so you just plug directly onto a sheet of film, and it's quite blurry, and it loses a lot of detail, and I find that quite frustrating because I wanted to draw the viewer in, to actually take you into the water. So I started taking these pictures, and it was great. Sort of, I'd like to think that when artists work well, they don't know what the fuck they're doing. It's just all of instincts, and then they can see that it works for whatever reason, and then you go, So suddenly I've made a relationship with the primeval swamp. I'm leading you down these banisters. I'm connecting the earth to the heaven. I'm connecting you to a future with the sky, to heaven. I'm connecting you with the water, primeval swamp, to the land. And suddenly the arching of the water with this pinhole camera gives you this bow. It becomes the pregnant belly of the mother island, where all the great civilizations of the world come from. New York, Sydney, the Holloway Road in London, all the greatest places of civilization in the world. You don't know the Holloway Road. So my grandmother apparently came from Dublin. So that was another thing. So I came over thinking I'm going to do something about people and identity. And I just couldn't really cope. And took those swims to sort of make that connection. So for me, it is people in a way, but these are stage sets. They're all stages. And it's the absence which gives the viewer, hopefully, gives you the chance to draw the people in them. Draw your forefathers, your forebearers, sort of people that have come from this area, sort of come out of the water or go into the water. It's that ever-ending loop, really, of in and out, connecting with life, connecting with that primeval force. So I'm hoping that you also, you imagine yourself taking down these and diving into the sea and being part of it. So it is seductive, and that's why I love photography as well. Hopefully these really pull you in and really want to make you go in there, back to the womb, back to that safety, back to the beginning. So it was a real breakthrough for me to do these works and not knowing what I was doing, and and it's taken me quite a while even to think about that. And what I've realised is, for me, I really love the absence of people in the way that then the viewer hopefully can imagine the viewer being there. You imagine yourself, it becomes like a Brechtian device in a way. You imagine the stage and you imagine the whole theatre being played out in front of you. So that's the idea. And that's led me to play with this pinhole camera when I came back to England. I mean, I've been doing this now since 2006, so nearly 10 years of working with this camera now. And this is just one small project with the Stones. And again, it's trying to connect with the beginning, really. So it's called Axis Mundi, which is the access point to the world. So it's the beginning of time. These stones are monuments to our megalithic inheritance. These stones carved, formed by a combination of wind, rain, carving, man, and they also connect with the use of this camera, the bow. They connect with the sky, the sun, the universe. So it's a point where everything comes together. It's our home in a way. So these are the first sort of settlements, the first time we've made our mark. And also, again, they become, for me, like ghosts. They become like the actors. They actually become the people within the plays. So I'm sort of painting the backdrop of the theatre, and hopefully these stones become the protagonists within this theatre. And the more I've been doing this, the more the stones sort of really come to life. And this one here becomes the sleeping figure. The one back there, it's almost for me, and I've been reading quite a lot about Henry Moore and his sculpture and how he talks about form. And for me, that is, again, it's a pregnant mother in the one of the two on the right-hand side as you look at it. She becomes a pregnant mother and she's connecting with that earth, connecting with that space, but connecting with the sky. The sky is obviously the universe. And, it's very cosmic, isn't it, man? I got accused of being a witch when I talked about this last week. Again, it was a matter of playing as well. So we're playing down to the 40-foot, playing just how can I connect with a place. Led to taking pictures, and this was the first picture that I did in the series. It was just lovely to have this toy. I took it to this little party in the middle of nowhere in Dorset. And then every time I go out to the countryside, I don't know if you do, but I get all the survey map, really high detail map. And I look on, they show the places, the megalithic sites. So I trekked for 3 hours to get to this place because I thought I'll get there just before the sun sets. I'll get that beautiful picture of the sun before it sets. And of course, you have to go through that river, don't you? You have to go around that house, you have to go through that swamp, you have to climb over that hedge, you have to get chased by that fucking dog that always bites your ass. And then the fucking time you get there, you set up the camera and the sun's gone down. Always. But you take that picture anyway because you've done all that work. And then something happens. And it's always... Sorry. That's right. And it always happens to me. There are times I really mess up. There's the times when the play happens and something unusual happens. And there's something about the light. We were talking about it yesterday. There's a golden hour, which everyone knows, the Hollywood golden hour, when the sun's rays come through the atmosphere because it's on the horizon, and it filters through and gives you this lovely warm glow. Hollywood and photographers love that warm glow in the face because it doesn't look quite so ugly and quite so pale and quite so Irish, quite beautiful. But if you let that sun actually go down, it does something quite different. And something quite different happened with that light. And so I thought, so that's led me to these other pictures. And there is no Photoshop. It's something really quite important for me. I don't really like... there's some reason why I took up this pinhole was as well, because so many of these talks I was going to, they were college talks. So you get like 200 kids there, and they always what's the question? Which D7576298 to use? How many mega figgity bobbly wobbly was it got? What size? What are you talking about? How much have you spent on your new figgity bobbly? I don't know what you're talking about. It doesn't really matter in a way, you know. It isn't about the lens, it isn't about the thousands of pounds, it isn't about the kit. It's just your involvement with the world, which I think photography is a core at. It's making a relationship with the world. So I really wanted to break away from the lens, break away from megapixels. So it's really nice to mess up. And I think with digital photography as well, everyone's got such a clear agenda, what the hell they're doing. They go out there and they say, I'm going to take a picture of that beautiful guy, beautiful sunset. I'll take it. Oh, that's not right, delete. I'll take it, delete, delete, delete. Oh, that's what I want, that's what I need, that's what I have. That's what they come back with. The great thing about making these pictures is you take the pictures, you take 5 of them because you can't afford to do any more. You come back to London like a week later, you put it in the processing, a few days later you get it back, and you've almost forgotten what the fuck you're doing, because you've been pissed, you've been to the party, you've been for a swim, you've done all this. You get these things back, you put them in your light box, and there's a whole other creative process goes through where you have to look at this in a different light, and then I leave them on the light box in my bedroom or in my office or my studio. And the process carries on for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and you see things in a completely different way, which is why my room is full up with these negatives, which I never chuck away. And it's always the ones which are, oh, fuck, I didn't want that. But wow, what's happened here? So, you know, where I did go to college, everyone says reciprocity law failure in film, which means that if you've got old film types, if you shoot over a minute, it does horrible things to your film. So don't do it with big flash guns or lighting units. So these ones are around 45 minutes, so you get this weird pinks and purples. But that's exactly what you really want to do. So it's a whole sort of playing around with things change. So these ones, I was getting up at 3 in the morning, hiking into Dartmoor and places for an hour, 2 hours in the pitch black with an ordnance survey map, setting it out in the pitch black with a light meter and going like this every sort of 10 minutes. Is it light? Isn't it light? Is it light? Isn't it light? And then when it's just changing, that's when the whole thing changes as well. And it's, so you can really, it feels as though everything's connected. It feels like you're changing and the process is changing. So it's a bit like when we talk about the Incas and their pyramids, and they climb up those steps to the top of the pyramids. And each step, you have a change in headspace. So it's actually a meditation. With each step, you go for a change in meditation. And the time you actually get to the peak of this, you're in a completely different headspace, in a different meditational zone. And it did feel like that when I was traipsing into, you know, Dartmoor with this rucksack on and the pitch black, you know, you're falling in the swamps, falling in the mud, getting lost, going round. And then something different happens as well with the film. Like maybe I'm being a bit of a talk about that, but it feels like that as well. So yeah, that's me talking about that. But yeah, and so these are all outdoor ones. Also, there's a book over there, and I've been also doing lots about inside interior spaces as well. So I've also been, it's been quite fun. I've been going into churches, synagogue, mosques, chapels, and been doing pictures there. And again, this pinhole camera has got the sense of the eternal. It's quite a heavenly light, isn't it? And that's what reminds me of going back to that tape now. It's those Joshua Reynolds paintings with those amazing skies and those amazing light, which also talks about heaven. It's connecting up the eternal, the earth, where we are now to the external. So it's very here and now, but it's also hopefully takes you into another space. So I've been doing that in buildings as well. So it's been quite an exploration to me to be as a tourist exploring my neighbourhood with this, as I've described it to my students as a, you know, I like to describe myself as Bill Murphy. You know, you've all seen that incredible art house film, Ghostbusters. And they go in, you know Ghostbusters?
Yeah, Bill Murray, yeah.
Well, if you've seen Ghostbusters, it's an incredible art house film. It's not very well distributed, so I don't think many people have seen it. But there is points when they come out and they've got their backpacks on and they get their lasers out and they weave them around. And you know when you cross over the what are they called? The cosmic something streams. What was it? Streams, yeah. Cross over those streams or it would explode. But you can actually capture the spirits if you bring them together and you can pull them down into that tiny box. And I do feel like that. I've got this tiny wooden box on this stand, and I go into on the moors, or I go onto a mosque, and I've got my sock, and I take it away from that pinhole, and it is, the light just pours in there, but it's not quite the aggressive. But I do feel as though I'm catching ghosts, and these do all feel like there's ghosts in all of them. You can actually see a few ghosts at Stonehenge hanging around, but it really feels like the ghosts are just pouring in here, and it's a very slow and very organic process, and it's just such a lovely way to work. You go into a mosque, and you have a big flash, and you have these thingy bobblies, and you go, can't did you splash, and everyone's a bit on top. You go into a mosque, people come in, they sit on their prayer mats and they pray, or the rabbi comes in, people are praying. The African churches, I can do these pictures for 45 minutes. No one takes notice of it. It's just a box. They can carry on doing their own thing, and it just feels like you're just there. It's not the grab and snatch, which is really just feels a wonderful way of working. So the practice becomes part of the process, which I was really like. So in some ways, by escaping the whole thing about I didn't want to get involved in camera talk, actually the camera has become sort of very pivotal part of my process and practice. So it's, and it's nice and light, so I can actually carry it, which is really nice. So,
Have you always then used film as, like prior to the pinhole camera?
Yeah.
Did you use film rather than digital photography?
I mean, I've got an iPhone now, but I've never actually used it in my work. Yeah. So I've always been film. I was at college, and I went to, I think, who was it? God, I can't remember now. I went to see a show at the Tate, and they had a Chrome print, and they're really high gloss prints, and it was on the wall. I can't remember the name of the guy now, whose show it was. He was an American photographer. Anyway, it was I was just totally blown away with it. I was just totally seduced by it. The colour, the saturation, the gloss. It looked like we were looking into a beautiful glossy magazine, but it looked so you could just dive into that amazing skin, and you could just swim around in it. And I thought, God, that's the way we want to go. So everyone said, all my tutors said, don't use 5x4, single sheet films. Use a roll film, because then you can do 10 or 12 rather than 1. And don't use transparency, because if you get the exposure wrong by the tiniest bit, it messes it up. But I got totally hooked. I was suckered on that. And then, I do refer back to that as a peasant. I am a peasant. I come from the boglands of Beer Regis and Dorset, a fucking boring little shithole of a village in the middle of nowhere.
Called?
Beer Regis.
Yeah. the full name, proper name.
Yeah, so I always say this. I say, where'd you come from? Nice conversation. I come from Beer Regis. Oh, Lyme Regis, that's so lovely. No, not Lyme Regis, Beer Regis. Oh, Lyme Regis, that's where the French Lieutenant's woman is. I've been on my holidays down there. It's so wonderful. Why have you moved to London? No, I live in Beer Regis. It's a fucking little shithole. Nothing to do, and it's desperate to move out and get involved in some life. All there is pigs and cows and one pub, and it's nothing to do. Okay. That moves up constantly. But I come from there. I spent all my holidays working on the local farms from the age of sort of 11, I suppose. I left school at 15, worked on farms, worked in the forestry. And I do relate that to that first time when these people from the bogs, from the hills, from rural France, will be working on the ground, toiling the soil, trying to scrape by to just feed your family. And then you have that pilgrimage, and you hike across the fields in a cart or on foot, and you get to somewhere like Chartres in France, and then, there's that cathedral. And then you go in there, you open up the doors, and these incredible stained glass windows. And it's like, could you imagine that? To be in this black and white background for a whole winter with nothing there, flats, boggy, cold, miserable, and then going into there with that light stream through the window, seeing the crucifix, seeing Christ, seeing the Madonna, seeing all that, and just being totally blown away by that colour, that saturation. And, on a very, very small scale, when I got my 5.4 transits back and I put them on the light box for the first time, and that colour blasted up, I was like, fuck, now this is it. This is everything that I always wanted. It's beautiful, it's lit, it holds that quality, and it's transformed the world. Even when you're like this on a miserable, cold day walking around London, when you bring this back, it suddenly takes you to a whole hyper reality of the world itself, which is so amazing. So I did, that's a long answer, isn't it?
Yes, but it was a great one, thank you.
So I did get totally obsessed by that, and I'm still using the slowest possible speed, 100 ASA. I still use this camera, and it's the wrong thing. So I should use at least 400 to use long exposure. So I'm using this wrong speed, everything else, but by my ignorance and my lack of understanding, in a way, it's left to do all sorts of mistakes that I was trained as a photographer not to do. It's left me to be playing and do something a little bit different, which is something much more interesting.
I'm not an artist, I know nothing about this at all, but can you explain to me what the camera obscura is and how it's different to what you do?
It's no different, it's exactly the same as what I do. So I was going to talk a bit about that actually, that's basically a camera obscura is a dark room. It's a blacked out room, so imagine this just being a box to that window there, and you black out everything, and you just put a small hole right in the centre. The light rays will come in, so the light hitting the top of that crane will come in at an angle, a straight light, always goes straight, will zoom down. If your wall at the back is white, it will hit down the bottom, and the bottom will go up to the top. So you get an image on the back of the wall. So upside down, back to front. So if you were in this room and this was the wall behind, and you're there, you'd actually see the real world out there in here, but upside down, back to front. So it would look like a photograph, but obviously it'll be moving. So it's a bit like Plato's cave as well. So there's that whole notion of what is reality. You never see reality, you just see a reflection from reality, which is exactly what photography is all about.
And I think it actually happens in nature.
Yeah.
It's a natural phenomenon.
It is, yeah.
Through the sun going through leaves of trees.
Exactly,
An image can be inverted on the floor, That's why it's so fitting for these works, I think.
So this box I've made is exactly that. It's just a pinhole, the light comes in, but I've just put a bit of light-sensitive paper behind it, which records that, fixes it, and then I'll close it up again and store it in this space. And that's another reason why I sort of started photography. So, I read a lot about Vermeer, and some of my early work was like, what is the quality of Vermeer's work, which I found so amazing? Well, yes, it's painterly and beautiful, but it was photoreal for me. It made a connection with the real world. It wasn't just an abstraction. It felt so real to me. So I really love that connection with the real world.
Vermeer was using camera obscura.
Sorry?
Vermeer was using camera obscura. That's why.
It hasn't been proven, but lots of people talk about it. Endless people have talked about did he use a camera obscura, and Hockney's talked a lot about that as artists using these little lenses on little stands on the tables and reflecting it, and then it's basically painted trace. So they were cheats, which is really interesting. So they weren't proper artists. So there's a whole conspiracy theory that these people weren't mature artists, they were cheating, and that's why they kept it a secret, and that's why it was never written down, because they were plagiarising reality rather than using free hand. So that's quite interesting. So what am I doing? I'm plagiarism, pastiching reality, which is all part of that thing as well, which I really like, that relationship with reality. But also, what would Vermeer done now? How would have he captured the real world? Some people say he would have done, be working for EastEnders or soap opera, or working for HBO, making a really amazing documentary about drugs in the streets of, the Wire or something. That's in some ways the greatest reflection of reality. So,
Can you talk a little bit more about the transition from doing character-based work to this kind of work? Like, did you find it freeing, or was it an extra challenge not to have those kinds of characters to glom onto? What was it like?
I suppose, everything is, if you open up one door, you close another door. So, but it was incredibly liberating. It was lovely because I am doing people again now. But it always, if I do a picture with people in it, there's a whole negotiation. And I think the best photographers are the people who can manage to communicate. It's actually the instrument that records it isn't so important. It's how you make a relationship with the subject. And then if you have a good relationship with them, then you can bring out the best with them. So for me to get a good picture of someone, I need to spend time with them, and it takes quite a while to build up a relationship and then arrange it and then do it. And then if something goes wrong or you've misrepresented it, there's a whole lot of baggage that goes with that whole process. So to actually just put a camera in my rucksack and get on a bike from Emma, cycle down that hill and head off down to Dublin Bay and just be there, not having to phone or to text or to arrange for people to be around, was incredibly liberating. But at the same time, and it's, I suppose what I've done is I've painted my own people there at the same time. But I haven't let go of it. I can't really let go of it because I do still love that relationship with people. So, and it is really powerful, I think, to be able to portray someone and bring out a quality in them that you want to share with the world, so they feel as though they're familiar with that person. So, is it lacking? Or, in fact, lots of times when I've shown these pictures, the pinhole pictures, actually, they become placed with characters within other pictures. So I have a sort of duality going on. So I become like empty stages with scenes. So it becomes a landscape in a way, as well as these become a landscape. These are much more ghostly landscapes. So I haven't dismissed it, and I still like doing it.
So I just want to ask something that relates to this, because being like a figurative photographer and going into like absence of figure, do you still treat the image making as if it was figurative, but with the notion of this absence?
Very much.
Because if you're dealing for so long with people, but then you're, as you said, like some of these stones, you see them as figurative. So that the notion of absence of people still makes for you this work being, in a sense, figurative in some
And I think my whole thought process and the whole way as I act as a practitioner still places the people in the frame. I still look at that, and I still look at the background as a background for people. I went to a talk yesterday of a guy called Harry Borden, he works for all the top magazines around the world, and he does all the big pop stars and film stars, and that's what he does. He just has, they call him in, he's like and he's been doing it for 20 years. We've had shows together in different things, and he says he's pared it back and pared it back and pared it back, and it's just all about the relaxing relationship with someone, and he says it's all about just placing the person with the right background. So that's all I'm doing really. I'm sort of looking for the background to place a person in. So it's, every time I'm sort of almost talking to a person there. If they're not there, I actually do place them there with the stones. And I still have it feels like they're there to me. It feels like I'm talking to someone in all of this.
I'm doing like very figurative work, but then sometimes I'm attracted to spaces, but for them like it's always this absence of people makes image being mine kind of like within the same way the way I see when there are people in this.
And I suppose I do the same with my photographs. I want the viewer to become the protagonist. So I want you to obviously go into that figure and imagine yourself as them. So it's a very similar thing you're doing. I still want you to be actually me to be in the picture. And so obviously if I'm in the picture, then you are yourself. So I'm actually putting you in the frame. So I'm actually, you're in the centre of that frame, and you're on the side, and you're just about to walk in or walk out, or whether it's Halle Berry or James Bond coming in or out of the water. It's that same process of,
Could I just ask you, I saw a fantastic show by Aaron Newman in San Francisco just before Christmas, it strikes me that your approach, at least, is would have a great affinity with the way he thinks about his photography, and as far as I can tell from reading about it. Who would you have an affinity with in terms of photography?
In terms of photography. Right. I think the American photographers are the ones that really influenced me when I was back at college, back in the early 90s. And Sally Mann was the person, the woman who became my archetype, and sort of the trailblazer in a way. And it was her process, but also the way she reacted within the world. I got very, very, I was a young punk, and that sort of young punk attitude is always, everything before you is crap and needs to be torn down and you do your own thing. And I had that sort of young Turk attitude of that. So the people above me were the sort of Martin Parrs of this world, the Magnum photographers, who I think are brilliant. And I love Martin Parr's work, New Brighton is. I was drawn to it, and then I was totally repulsed by it. It also reminded me, when I was a young punk, everyone was laughing at Elvis and laughing at the Beatles when I was sort of 13, 14. Now I love the Beatles and I love Elvis again, as well as the Sex Pistols. So it's a bit like that. But
why were you repulsed by it?
Sorry?
Why were you repulsed by it?
So the reason why I was repulsed by it was that attitude of, you're not part of the world. You're just this flaneur, this person who just goes around and you grab whatever you want, and you take it, and it's yours, and then you do it, and you don't give anything back. And there was a lot of that sort of photography was about not interacting. So you go off to Africa, oh brilliant, there's someone dying of starvation. Click, click, click. Let's put that in the Sunday Times magazine and make some money out of it. Oh look, there's some poor people over there in a ghetto. Look, black people or gypsies. You take a few pictures, and from a distance with a nice big lens, you don't get too close to them. Take a picture, and then you do a runner. And all you're doing is you're just taking. I don't think that's particularly true, and it's a much more complicated issue. But that's in my head. I had that notion that that's what these people were doing. Looking back on it, actually, they were doing a vital job in informing us of what the world was really like. But I wanted to turn that mirror around. So what Sally Mann was, the only subject matter that she found interesting was her life. So rather than saying, oh, look at those people, look at him, look at the other, oh, look at those ugly, look at that rich, look at that idiot, it was actually, well, look at yourself, stop going like that, and actually look at yourself. Actually, we're all hideous, we're all ugly, we're all drug-addicts, we're all whatever it is. So when she turned it back and she took those pictures of her children, of her farm in Virginia, I think it is, she's got the girls on the river, and it was quite a weird thing to do. She's got pre-pubescent young girls with no clothes on in water, and there's a huge outcry about that. But she dealt with that reality of sexuality, of childhood, of representation. But it was all from her, and it felt such a real place to do it, and it felt like a massive breakthrough. And obviously everyone's gone on to do that. Tracy Emin, shags in her bed and shows us her stained sheets, and they're great artwork, and they don't win the Turner Prize, but they're in the Tate. And everyone's talking about the authenticity of the artist. But it wasn't that long ago that the photographer was always the guy who didn't involve himself in the world. He floated around and grabbed things, and he never really interacted, didn't know the language. So when I did my pictures, it was always about my friends I was living with on the bus, travelling, it was my spotting, my neighbours. Everything was a self-reflection, so everything was a self-portrait, and that was very important to my whole practice and the way I thought about the world. Now it seems a bit too politically naive to say that, and it just seems a bit naff really. And I think what Martin Parr was, it becomes, photography is such a wonderful, wonderful medium, because as soon as you take it, 20 years after you take it, it's almost like it doesn't matter what the pictures look like. They are, wow, look at the flares, look at that hairstyle, look at that t-shirt, look at the bag. It's just such an amazing social document of the life and times. So now Martin's Parr's pictures are so important for the way I understood the social, economic and political situation that was happening to these people in Liverpool under Margaret Thatcher at that time of recession and things. So, yeah, I'm not slagging off, but it's interesting how Sally Mann really influenced me in that respect. And Jeff Wall, obviously, the way he uses narrative as well, that fed in. So that it's the Americans that really stood out for me because, you know, grew up and it was David Bailey and these people. And yeah, I love looking at naked women. Everyone does. I love looking at naked flesh. And it's, yeah, we've all got beautiful bodies, but to just say, I just found it a little bit too, oh, what you're saying is it just sex? But there seemed to be very little behind it. So, yeah, no conception, no theories, no care.
I don't know what reality is, but I'll be chanced if I don't know.
Okay, yeah.
Well, thanks for coming. Very enjoyable, thank you.
Great, Sean. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just one question. Having gone from sort of figurative work, which were highly posed in terms of you laid it out, you got it right, you composed it, to going into this where you're accepting what comes in at you, would you ever be tempted to go down the route of more art documentary photography where you're going about and capturing what you're seeing instantaneously involving figurative work, that sort of thing, which would be very different to either the composed piece or like longer exposure over light box?
I mean, digital photography, I was slagging off earlier, but like every tool, it has a place. And it is wonderful to be able to have, the cameras are getting amazing now, that you can have a decent, smaller size camera, but with decent resolution. Because I do love, you know, my work is for the gallery. I love to be able to people to come in and almost dive into it. And before digital was great for iPads, laptops, newspapers, magazines, but if you really want to make a beautiful print, then still nothing compares with the resolution that you take from a film. Nothing comes close. It's the same with the cinema. If you see something shot in 70mm compared with high definition, nothing comes close to that relationship you get with film. But yeah, there is such a freedom. There's a book I've done over there called The Crowbars. I spent 2 years travelling around, and I shot with a 35mm camera. And the freedom that I had with that, just snapping away every day, was just a wonderful feeling. And it was so liberating. And it was amazing for me last year to get those pictures out of my cover after 20 years and get them out and print them up. And I just live such a fucking boring life. There's no point in documenting like that at the moment. But if I do ever do something interesting, I would love to have a camera which would be able to, just wouldn't care too much and play. Yeah, being an artist, you have to play, which is very important. And digital allows you to play without worrying about expense. So it is a wonderful tool. Once I get my Harley Davidson on the road, and I head off to the Middle East to do my tour around the Middle East, I will hopefully take something like that off and I can play with that. And maybe something will come of that. There will be a play and I'll see if everything happens. Yeah.
Tell us how you got that commission, Tom, or that project. How does that come about?
I've been offered a commission by the National Portrait Gallery in London, and they obviously, as you may or may not know, the National Portrait Gallery is different than National Gallery. National Gallery Portrait Gallery always deals with celebrities and portraits, and they wanted me to do a project. And I hate celebrity culture. It's always been about my work is to represent people who don't normally get the chance to be represented. So it's quite a different way. But they've got a painting of a guy called Lawrence of Arabia. You've probably heard of Lawrence of Arabia. The guy who was out there riding his camels around. Last year I got quite obsessed again with motorbikes. I grew up on motorbikes in the village I grew up to get out. And Lawrence of Arabia died a few minutes up the road from me on his Bruff Superior, the most incredible bike. I used to go to India every year and ride these Royal Enfields, which are 1940s, 50s design. And if you have a original on any of those, flat out, you might better get 48 out of it flat out with that technology on a 500cc motorbike. Nowadays, with a 500cc motorbike, we're talking 150, 160, 170 miles an hour. But the Brough Superior, I mean, it was a 750 and 900, but they did 120 miles an hour, so it was the super bike at the time. That's what he died on. So I got quite obsessed by him and his life, and obviously we're all so affected by what's happening in the Middle East. You know, the British, in our great glorious way, have fucked up everywhere we pretty much touched around the world, as some of you might have been aware of. And monumentally, we've fucked up the Middle East more than anywhere else in the world. And those artificial borders that we put in between Syria, Jordan,
Iraq,
Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia are just, well, I don't need to say very much about it. But my understanding of it is so clouded and so confused. Yes, I want the Jews to come out of suffering, come out of the Holocaust and have their own land. Yes, I want the Palestinians to have their own land. Yes, I want everyone to be happy and give each other a kiss and it's all great. But, so it's a great way for me to understand it. So it's a way for sort of going back. But I want to do a portrait of a life, really, but a life that explains things. So yeah, I don't know how the fuck I do that. Just give me a chance to write a book and sort of go back to, you know, where it all starts in a way. It all starts in the Middle East, starts in Jerusalem. So I think it could be quite an interesting. So they're going to give me a nice room that's about the size of that room there to make a portrait of a person. So rather than a portrait, as I talked about before, being a photograph of a person, I can't do that. Or, well, I could just borrow a portrait that's been taken. But I want to try and paint a landscape of his life and the issues that have sort of arisen out of his life, really, and what happened to him, his betrayal in the Middle East. Very easy.
So are you trying to politically provoke as well by looking at the end results and sort of saying, well, if that's going to be exhibited in the National Portrait Gallery, I want to politically challenge what's going on?
No, I try not to think. I try not to think that far ahead. I really want to do a bit of playing with it and see what comes out. But you can't sidestep politics when you're talking about
People's lives.
His legacy. You know, it's 100 years since the end of 2018, at the end of the First World War, where the Ottoman Empire was defeated and the British and the French carved up the Middle East as we know it today. So, to the 3 years' time, it'll be an interesting time to look back at those borders and what's happening there now. So I can't sidestep it. So I will do. But I went into the Tower Block project thinking this is going to be a bit of an indictment about social housing. It actually came out as a celebration of social housing. So you never quite know, and you hope things will change when you get involved in a project. It'd be horrible to have an idea and it to come off. It'd be like taking a picture with a digital camera and getting what you want. It's a waste of time. You never know what you want. If you think you know what you want, it's always wrong. I want that person. Oh wow, she looks great. Yeah, she's going to be a lot of things. Just get what life gives you. It's much more interesting.
Is there a kind of, like, some of your previous photography engaged with art history in a kind of indirect way or restaging kind of sense?
Yeah.
And in a way you can't think about Lawrence of Arabia without thinking about it through the prism of David Lean's film. So in a way that's presumably quite a self-conscious thing from your point of view. The challenge of seeing through the veil, another veil or another layer that's already there.
Yeah, there are all these layers of representation, and that one is one of the greatest pieces of artwork. But if you ever get a chance to see that again, oh my God, shot on a 70mm, and David Lean's cinematography is absolutely mind-blowing. You know, it's just a wonderful, wonderful experience to see that, and the acting and everything is done so well. So you obviously can't. So you have to make something quite different from that, which will be really interesting to make something very different and can stand on its own self. But it has to reference it. It gives it another layer of it, but hopefully provoke you in quite a different way. So hopefully we'll connect much more with the people there. Maybe that's what I'm sort of hoping for. All these prisms of reality are interesting, aren't they? That we sort of, nothing's ever as we see it. We see it through a painting and through a film and through, obviously the book is where it all comes from.
Yeah.
the 7 pillars of wisdom.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
So that sort of sets